Over the past few years, there's been a serious rethinking of criminal justice policy around the country. Among the main concerns is how to reduce incarceration and recidivism, which requires better reentry programs. Some of the ideas for those programs are in legislation filed by two state representatives from Dorchester, Evandro Carvalho and Dan Cullinane, with broad support from district attorneys throughout the state. Also backing the effort is the advocacy group Community Resources for Justice. We'd like to welcome its president and CEO, John Larivee. Thank you very much for being with us, John.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for having me.
John, talk about the people who have the most at stake here. These are the offenders you want to become ex-offenders, and I guess there's more going on with them than just the fact that they broke the law.
That's right. And the people we're talking about that this is focused on are those who are finishing up their sentence. They have some months remaining in their time and want them to come out through a residential reentry center. We operate several of those. And use that as a way to get back into the community. So the people who benefit, yes, clearly those individuals, but I think also their family members and the community members enhance public safety by doing this right in a structured, supervised, controlled way, able to have people come back in and get the supports and the appropriate services that they need to do it the right way.
Well, you have a host of other problems going on. You've got sometimes substance dependency, you've got educational shortcomings. So talk about some of those things that you got to work on.
Yeah, depending on how long you've been away, the world is very different than when you went in. I came over here on the MBTA and used my Charlie card. People that we're working with remember tokens. Cell phones were not in existence, or certainly not smartphones were in existence. And today, all of those things are essential tools in getting around in the community and getting back in. So what we're doing is try to help them pick up the essentials around stable housing, full-time employment, driver's license, a public identification, a state identification card that you need to do anything, to apply for any kind of job, to apply for any kind of service. Helping them with that. At the same time, dealing with the behavioral health issues. So we use evidence-based practices in all of our programs that focus on what are the need areas, what are the causes of their criminality, and how do we get those under control and give them a path forward.
One thing I've read about sometimes is that people coming out of confinement, you can't just put out all these programs they can take advantage of and expect that to happen. They need some kind of individualized attention.
They do. They need, just simply pointing the way is not sufficient. In some cases you need to push, in some cases you need to pull, in other cases you need to back up so that when they hit the frustration of someone saying, well, you didn't fill this form out right, or you need to get something else first. Somebody who can carry that burden and help them, counsel them through those barriers.
Of course, another factor here is if you don't have stable housing.
Right, yeah, and happens? You can imagine stable housing in the city of Boston for a group of individuals largely with very little financial resources. So when they come into a halfway house like the ones we operate, they're able to get a job, save some money, and start to get ready for that. And then we work with them in finding an appropriate housing location for them.
What about the record of some of the reentry programs that we have up and running? How effective are they?
They're very effective. And when we look at what happens on recidivism front for people who go through a residential reentry center, it's about 25% less of a recidivism rate than those who come straight out of prison. Again, we're able to take care of those services that they need, put them on that path, and at the same time provide that structure and supervision that's essential for the first few days. It's that first couple of months that's so critical. The Department of Public Health, in looking at the opioid addiction history, identified recently released inmates as a high-risk group. You're 120 times more likely to die of an overdose in the first few months of release if you're a former coming out of prison.
Also, talk about the difference one of these programs can make. If you're an ex-offender, you're doing all the right things, and you go look for a job without anybody really to vouch for you.
And oftentimes the individual is very reluctant to reveal that. And when they're with us, we help them do that. And we help them tell the story very upfront about what their record is. And so the employer knows that. And it's not a surprising finding later on which disrupts the employment. We also provide assistance to the employer. So if the individual's having a rough time getting there on time, we can work on our end to make sure that that happens. We serve as a backup HR department to the businesses that employ these individuals.
If things really worked out for the best with criminal justice reform, we'd be spending less on incarceration and we'd have more for reentry. So how do things stack up right now?
Well, we're in a squeeze right now. The state budgets have not been growing as fast as corrections administrators would need and want. Their numbers are down, but their costs are kind of fixed. And our funding for the reentry services, a lot of it has come from the line items for prison and jail expenses. So as those get tighter, we become expendable. The services that in the community become expendable. So what Representative Carvalho and Representative Cullinane are helping us do is secure a line item in the budget, not dedicated to us, but dedicated to this purpose, that would be applied for statewide services.
How does that compare to the level of spending in past years, let's say?
Well, I think you'd have to go back to the 70s to find dedicated funding for community-based corrections. Unlike in states around us, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, Ohio, Michigan, have rich networks of these kinds of programs funded by public budgets.
We should mention if people want some more details on these ideas, you've got that on your website, I think?
We do, yes, crj.org, yes.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Okay, Chris, thank you very much.
John Larivee from Community Resources for Justice.